Welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. Today, my good friend Leeor. He is the head of growth at StackingDAO. Before we get too deep into StackingDAO, give us a brief background on yourself. How did you get into this, Bitcoin Web3 ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So personally, been working professionally in the crypto space since around 2016 or so. So definitely has been some time. I've had a variety of roles. Started off actually launching a fund called Nova Block Capital back in 2016, 2017. Was running the fund for a couple of years, more so, backing founders working on infrastructure projects at the time. From there, I joined a company called Fundstrat, which is more of a market research firm. Was a VP of digital asset strategy there. So I was on their market research desk. After that, I was poached by a recruiter at Kraken. So I was working on business development at Kraken, which is pretty interesting to be part of the exchange space. And now I'm at StackingDAO, which is definitely interesting in terms of being part of the Stacks ecosystem and really bringing more utility and functionality to Bitcoin. I think kind of taking a step back, Bitcoin obviously is the leading crypto asset in the space, and I think it kind of drew a lot of us into the space initially. And even from my own personal interest and kind of, I think when I think about what drew me to Bitcoin initially, I actually have family down in Argentina, and seeing just like the bouts of inflation that they had to deal with, as well as government corruption. Bitcoin really resonated with me personally. And anything that we can do to bring more functionality and usability to Bitcoin, I think is a good thing. So, I'm sure we'll get into it over the course of this conversation, but, a project like Stacks and what we're working on at StackingDAO, I think will go a long way to really bringing that utility to Bitcoin.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about this utility to Bitcoin, because I think the narrative has existed for a little bit, but it's new to many people. So when I was buying Bitcoin in 2012, it was just like something you bought fake IDs with online. And then talk to us a little bit about the Bitcoin Renaissance and how utility has been brought to it.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's interesting to use the term Bitcoin Renaissance, because that's really what we're seeing right now. There's a lot of new builder energy, I would say, that's coming back to Bitcoin. Whereas other ecosystems have started to push forward the boundaries of, new use cases and utility for things you can do with blockchains. I feel like a lot of that ethos or a lot of that energy is coming back to Bitcoin, which has been very inspiring. But yeah, so, as we know, Bitcoin obviously is the largest crypto asset by market cap, but it has limitations, right? So it's slow, it's clunky, it has limited programmability and functionality. Transactions take tens of minutes to go through, and can also cost tens of dollars at times when the chain is congested. So that doesn't lend itself to being able to experiment and create new use cases or applications. That being said, that hasn't stopped builders from kind of leveraging the technology to experiment and try new things, and really try to drive more demand to Bitcoin as well. Because at the end of the day, Bitcoin is it's open source software. It's an open permissionless, technology that anyone can interact with and use. Even though it has those limitations, there's been new efforts to kind of create layers on top of Bitcoin to add that additional functionality. And this really isn't anything new. So if you kind of go back to 2013, 2014, you have protocols like Counterparty that try to enable the newer use cases and the ability to issue other assets onto the Bitcoin blockchain without changing the Bitcoin blockchain itself. But for whatever reason, I feel like a lot of that energy has moved to other ecosystems. Obviously Ethereum was a big driver of that. Solana, a bunch of other blockchains that have really gained a lot of public attention in recent years. But really starting in the early 2023, so early last year, we had the launch of the Ordinals protocol, and Ordinals, brought NFTs to Bitcoin, and it's something called a meta protocol. So what that means is that you're able to use the Bitcoin block space in interesting new ways without fundamentally changing Bitcoin. And it's a little bit different from Bitcoin L2s that have also launched pretty soon thereafter. But yeah, I think the Ordinals protocol itself kind of helped to kickstart what we call Bitcoin Season 2. So bring a lot of this energy and attention amongst builders back to Bitcoin to, again, just try to experiment and build new applications.
And I think we, of course, have to talk about Stacks. So talk to us a little bit about what kind of innovations Stacks has brought and then what you guys are trying to do at StackingDAO.
Yeah, absolutely. Stacks has been in development for quite a while. I believe since 2013, 2014 or so. First launched its mainnet in January of 2021. So is one of the first Bitcoin L2s to launch. What really piqued my interest about Stacks initially was, again, like bringing more utility and functionality to Bitcoin without changing the Bitcoin base layer. But they also had they had the first Reg A Plus offering that's regulated by the SEC. And so to me, that was kind of interesting. This was back in 2019. And so that's what really piqued my interest about Stacks, or at least that's how it fell on my radar initially. And then once I started to learn more about what they were doing, it really piqued my interest even more. The fact that, you're creating an application that, is inviting builders to come back to Bitcoin and create permissionless applications. That definitely resonated with me because at the end of the day, we need to find a way to make Bitcoin building more sustainable, and even the Bitcoin blockchain itself. As I'm sure you've talked about before, or if you've had discussions with guests in the past, we still have a big question about Bitcoin sustainability. Because as the block reward dwindles and comes down every 4 years due to the halving, we need transaction fees to kind of make up the slack and incentivize miners to continue to mine Bitcoin. So the only real way to do that is, creating these L2 technologies that are bringing new use cases and essentially driving more demand for Bitcoin block space. So that what that will do is that will increase transaction fees and allow for that revenue to go to miners and kind of ensure its sustainability over time.
And for people that are listening, they're like, Bitcoin L2, like we've had BitLayer on here, but let's assume they haven't heard any of the episodes. Talk to us a little bit about like, does Stacks have a native asset? Is it you lock up a certain amount of Bitcoin, then you get a token minted on StackingDAO? Talk to us a little bit about, on Stacks. Talk to us a little bit about like the functionality and how this all like kind of works together.
Sure. So what makes Stacks unique is its consensus mechanism, which is called proof of transfer. And the way that this works is you have two main parties that are part of this mechanism. So you have the Stacks holders, and what they do is they stack or lock up their tokens to receive rewards. So this is pretty similar to kind of other proof of stake networks where, functionally you just, you have a certain amount of Stacks tokens, you delegate or you lock them up to participate in that process, and you earn rewards for doing so. On the other side is you have the Stacks miners. And so what they do is they contribute Bitcoin to try to win the next Stacks block. And so by doing so, they'll earn, the block reward, which is additional Stacks, as well as the transaction fees for that particular block. And so that Bitcoin reward then flows back to the STX stackers, so the other folks that have been locking up their Stacks tokens. And that yield has been, very attractive. It's averaged around 8% APY, and that's paid out in Bitcoin. So, I think that's been an interesting mechanism to bootstrap this network and also build a lot of liquidity and security for the network as well. And so what we do at StackingDAO, we're a liquid staking protocol, pretty similar to Lido on the Ethereum network, where we allow you to easily earn those stacking rewards without having to run a node yourself. So you deposit any amount of STX tokens to our platform and you mint our liquid staking token, STSTX. And just by holding that token, you actually earn the rewards, which over the last few months has been on average 9% APY. But something that's also interesting about our platform is that we automatically convert the Bitcoin rewards into Stacks. So something that we like to say, by holding STSTX, it's actually the best way to be long Stacks. because you're auto compounding with additional Stacks tokens as opposed to Bitcoin. And something that's interesting about the Stacks token itself as well is, I actually did a bit of analysis around the price performance of Stacks versus Bitcoin. And Stacks itself kind of exhibits properties of being high beta to Bitcoin. So what that means is that whenever Bitcoin does well, Stacks tends to do even better. Now that also cuts to the downside. So, obviously it's a bit more volatile than Bitcoin because, Bitcoin obviously has this massive network and holder base, and Stacks is a lot earlier in its journey. But, if you're bullish Bitcoin, another way to express a bullish bet is, if you want to take on a bit more risk, maybe to hold an asset like Stacks, mint STSTX, earn those additional rewards that are auto compounded. And we've seen that price performance has done quite well for investors.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about like what we can do with this STX. Sorry, it's a tough name for me to pronounce personally.
STSTX.
It does not roll off the tongue well for me. So talk to us a little bit about what you can do. Are people doing a lot of DeFi on the Stacks ecosystem? Are they taking this liquid staking token and then like putting it into a new like dApp? Like talk to us a little bit about what they're doing with this token.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's interesting for us is when we launched STSTX, we really saw an explosion in Stacks DeFi TVL. Because, if you think about it, it actually really makes sense because liquid staking tokens kind of serve as a core foundation for the rest of DeFi to proliferate on a blockchain. Because before STSTX and StackingDAO existed, if you want to earn those stacking rewards, you basically had to make a decision. There was a trade-off. Either you participate in the stacking process and you lock up those tokens and you can't touch them and you earn those rewards, or you participate in DeFi and leverage all these other apps that may provide other yield opportunities. Now with StackingDAO, you don't have to make that decision. You can do both, which I think has been great in terms of just the growth of the Stacks DeFi ecosystem. So yeah, we've seen definitely a lot of the core DeFi primitives that exist in other ecosystems come to Stacks, as a result of, just this extra liquidity that we've injected into the ecosystem. So, we have, there's lending protocols like Zest. You have crypto-backed stablecoins like Arcadico. You have DEX AMMs like Bitflow and Velar. So, if you want to earn rewards or earn yield, now, you can mint STSTX with your Stacks tokens. Just by doing that, you earn the 9% APY. But then you have this whole universe of other DeFi apps that you could explore and deploy into to really compound those rewards, with other opportunities. So, ever since we launched our protocol back in December of last year, we've really seen that explosion in TVL. And I think just like this extra liquidity has been a big driver of that.
Yeah, and I have to ask, because I never thought of this, but it may be a dumb question. So, okay, we've got the underlying token, and then we are able to deposit it. We get our liquid staking token. And then if we go deposit that onto another dApp, does that just effectively double the TVL of the chain? Because we're just able to like take the original token that's locked, then we take the derivative contract, the token, and then we put that into another protocol. I never thought about this, but is this just a sneaky way to double TVL for any kind of chain?
Well, I guess maybe that's one way to look at it. I wouldn't say it's that sneaky because you're taking an asset, you're deploying it in one, earning rewards there, but then you deploy it in another another protocol. You're still leveraging different kind of products and use cases. So yeah, you are increasing TVL, but at the same time, you're kind of encouraging a whole kind of industry to grow and to be created that didn't exist before. So, I think it depends how you look at it. It's an interesting way to phrase it as you did.
I didn't mean sneaky in a nefarious sense. I meant just like, oh, that's quite interesting because like I came from the traditional finance background. So it's like, all right, let's just imagine we have a cart of apples, and now we're not only have the underlying value of those apples, but now we have a derivative contract that's tracking the value of those apples, so that then those two things can trade. And it's quite interesting. Derivative contracts have always been quite interesting to me. So let's talk a bit about.
I think it's been a big question even for data platforms like DeFi Llama, right? Like how do you categorize TVL? And I've seen them integrate staking protocols like ours, and then maybe remove them and then integrate them again. So I feel like they're even trying to figure this out. What's the best way, like to, truly define what TVL should be? I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't think we really have a good answer for that.
Yeah, there's also a question, and we talked with this about Bedrock, where there's definitely, in my opinion, a good opportunity, and maybe it already exists and I'm just unfamiliar with it, but a good opportunity to create dashboards around liquid staking, liquid restaking, where you can essentially be like, okay, well, I have this token, and that's actually pegged to the underlying risk of like this provider and this provider. I don't know if you know that exists. Builders stand out, but I think this is a good opportunity for somebody to build something.
Yeah. I mean, we're all for these, interesting new use cases to emerge.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you are the head of growth, and talk to us a little bit about. You started in BD. Talk to us a little bit about the responsibilities of BD and how that kind of differs from the head of growth, and like what kind of your responsibilities are for StackingDAO.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what really attracted me to this role and this position, I mean, beyond just the value in the protocol itself, but this role, I would say it's like BD and more. So I think it's kind of multidisciplinary because you do have to be very active in terms of relationship building and opportunistic in terms of finding other platforms that make sense to align with and build relationships to really drive those forward. But at the same time, you also have to be mindful that you're growing a community. So you need very open and transparent communication. You need community building skills. You need the ability to, really speak and to write clearly and leverage Twitter and whatever other platforms you need to manage the community. Because, I mean, for better or worse, like with these blockchain protocols, you're really, it's very different from the IP market and traditional tech and venture where, going public and getting liquidity is really the end goal. Here you're really moving that forward, by years and driving liquidity very early on and building community very early on, when you're launching your token. And then when you build that community, you have all these different interests and desires and wants. Everyone wants number to go up. But you're also still like kind of early stage in terms of finding product market fit. I think for us at StackingDAO, we were pretty fortunate in the sense that we found product market fit pretty early on, and there was just kind of an inherent need and demand for a liquid staking token like ours in the Stacks ecosystem. So we kind of launched kind of with already that built in to our DNA. But at the same time, kind of growing and cultivating community and being responsive to their needs, wants, and desires. It's challenging because you just have all these different stakeholders that you now like have to listen to and you have to respond to, while also building and driving things forward.
Yeah, I'm probably on the end of the spectrum where I like wait as long as possible to launch a token. But I come from like the infrastructure background where I'm like, I don't know, we're changing the business so much. I wouldn't want to be beholden to like VCs plus community plus this plus that. But I think
to be fair, just to clarify, we haven't launched a token in StackingDAO, but we do have a points program. So we can't really talk about our plans for the token. But whenever there's a points program, you can kind of put two and two together and, kind of infer what that might mean. But that being said, we do have an active community base of, we have 40,000 active users that are holding STSTX, and they're very vocal, on our Discord and on Twitter. So, again, just kind of being responsive to their needs and their wants is always top of mind.
Yeah, and so in terms of like growing the pie, so to speak, so like focusing on growth, like is it all community-led efforts? Is it like hopping on Twitter Spaces? Is it like writing a bunch of blog posts? How do you guys find like how has been best for you to grow the platform?
Yeah, I'd say it's all the above. Very active on Twitter Spaces. We actually, our co-founders host a weekly DeFi show every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. EST. So, if you're interested in learning more about Stacks DeFi, definitely recommend checking that out. And we also have a ton of interesting guests come to that show as well. And sorry, did I lose you? Hey, did I lose you?
Yeah, it's all good. It records locally, so we'll just cut it out at the end. As long as you keep talking and it comes back, we'll be fine.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I encourage folks to check out the Stacks DeFi show every Tuesday morning if you want to learn more. We're also very active on Twitter and Discord, as I mentioned. Writing blog posts, doing interesting analyses. As I mentioned earlier, doing a kind of a relative price performance of Stacks versus Bitcoin versus STSTX. I think that's been impactful just to illustrate the relative price performance of these different assets. And obviously, historical performance is no promise for the future, but it's always helps to take a look back and see what that performance looked like. And yeah, just kind of also like generating memes and just like having a culture of fun, right? Like we've kind of leaned into that. And I think that really helps to build our brand. And we're just going to continue to do that.
All right. Well, I'm going to play a game that I played with the head of growth at Shardium. So I'm gonna say a marketing channel, and you're going to tell me overrated or underrated. All right. Newsletter.
I think I'm going to like caveat all of these, but I would say underrated, but also it depends what you do with it, right? Like you shouldn't just regurgitate what everyone else is saying. If you can actually have an interesting voice and opinion that's unique, then I think you can do very well with it, and it serves as great top of funnel to drive new users or customers, whatever you're looking for.
Paid ads.
I think overrated. I think it's just like another tool in your toolbox that you can leverage if you have the budget. But I think I see too many companies just kind of throwing money down the drain and like trying different ads that probably doesn't make sense for them, that their core audience probably isn't there to begin with. And it's always best to try and drive things organically, through conversations like this, through just being responsive to your community and, providing interesting, thought material or written pieces that, touch on things your community is interested in. I think that's always the best way to go.
I agree. Now, Twitter Spaces.
I would say they're probably appropriately rated.
I agree.
I think, a lot of folks have definitely been leaning into that, and it's a good, distribution mechanism and way to quickly reach many people in your audience. That being said, I'm still curious about like the bot problem at Twitter. And, sometimes I'll hop on a space and there'll be, over 1,000 people attending, but I wonder just how many of them are actually real, I'm assuming it's some fraction of that.
Yeah. I think people definitely do juice the numbers, which is an unfortunate reality in this space. But let's talk a little bit about, how do you feel about Web3? We'll call it SocialFi, like a Farcast or a Lens. Overrated, underrated?
It's interesting. I just personally, I'm optimistic, and I think in the long term, there will be one of those platforms that does break out and is a major success. But as of now, I think that they're still trying to copycat too much of what Twitter is already doing. And the social graph is just so important, right? That's where all the value is, right? And so if me as a creator, let's see, on Twitter, I have between 7,000 and 8,000 followers right now. And it took me a few years to kind of reach that number. And, I still think that there's a far way for me to go in terms of even increasing that as well. But, to me though, those users are still, or those followers are still very important to me. And, I feel like for Farcaster and some of these other platforms, you almost have to start from scratch. I created a Farcaster platform profile pretty recently, and it's I don't know, maybe I have 100 followers or so, and there's still no easy way to transport your social graph from one platform to the next. You're kind of starting from scratch and building your distribution from scratch. And I don't see those platforms really providing a strong value proposition for me to dedicate my time and energy to build or to creating on those platforms, at least not yet, but maybe there's some product release that will change that. I'm sure I think that Frames is interesting just to kind of reduce frictions, interact with different applications, or make payments natively within the feed. But I don't know, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, for me, I found the onboarding experience. I want to like Workcaster, but I found the onboarding experience to be quite difficult. Twitter feels very intuitive. It's post on the timeline, but Farcaster almost has this addition of like Reddit to it, where you also then need to know like the sub channels you need to be posting on. There's like different, it's I find it to be quite a tricky platform. But all right, so now we've gone through the growth channels. Are there any, let's say there's a marketer out there, somebody looking to get into growth, are there any recommendations you would make to, let's say they want to start their career? What kind of advice would you give people?
Yeah, I would say one great way, and this is something that I've done myself, is just to write, and create content. And it doesn't matter if you feel like you're writing or speaking into a void, because you're still just creating your repository and kind of your library of things you can point to, as you progress through your career. So that's what I did, when I was running Nova Block Capital. My initial foray into the space is I wrote a biweekly kind of op-ed article, and it was like my own distribution that I was building for Nova Block at the time. And, it was just kind of a blend of what I was seeing in the markets, interesting kind of trends that were developing in crypto, but also from a macro perspective. And through that, I did that for probably about a year or so. I met a close friend who was a writer at Forbes. And I actually just randomly met him at a crypto conference in New York City. And he liked the writing that I was doing and the work I was doing. And he invited me to help him with an article that he was working on at Forbes. And through that, really built that relationship and also met the broader Forbes team. And they invited me to be a senior contributor for Forbes. And, that's still a platform that I use today to get out some thoughts or ideas. And, that's obviously done a lot to really improve my credibility in the space. So what I would say is, you don't know where things are going to lead. Best just to get started, start doing some work. If you're doing good work, you'll get noticed and things will just take care of themselves from there.
Absolutely. Great content. We're a big fan of that on the pod, obviously. Talk to us a little bit about like some upcoming milestones or things that are coming to, Stacks and StackingDAO.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually a massive upgrade for the Stacks network that we're all super excited about. It's called the Nakamoto Upgrade. And it's going to be what I believe it will be a big unlock for the Stacks ecosystem. Because right now, Stacks is a little bit clunky in the sense that transactions confirm alongside Bitcoin blocks. So that means the blocks are very slow. It takes tens of minutes for a transaction to go through because those transactions ultimately have to be deposited and anchored to Bitcoin every block. Now, what the Nakamoto Upgrade will do is it's going to really speed up those transactions. So through a newer consensus mechanism, what it will do is it's going to compress the confirmation times down from tens of minutes down to 5 to 10 seconds. And if you think about all the DeFi use cases that exist and other faster blockchains, I think it will unlock a lot of opportunity and innovation for the Stacks DeFi ecosystem. So this upgrade is slated to activate on or around October 9th. So just in a couple of weeks' time. It's something that's been in development for, I believe, over a year now by various teams within the Stacks ecosystem. So that's something that we're looking forward to, as one of the core DeFi protocols on Stacks, because, it's always great just to encourage just better UI UX so that new developers can come into the ecosystem and, build new apps that we never would have thought of. And another thing as well that's kind of going alongside Nakamoto or being developed alongside Nakamoto will be the launch of SBTC. So, this will be a way to actually natively deploy Bitcoin on the Stacks blockchain, so that what I think this will do is unlock a whole new like array of ways to generate yield or to leverage your Bitcoin in various ways, whether that's generating yield, whether that's borrowing against your Bitcoin, maybe minting new Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. Whatever it may be, I think that there's definitely a lot of Bitcoin holders that are starved for yield and that don't trust centralized platforms, and for good reason. We've seen all these blowups that happened in the last couple of years. So SBTC is slated to launch about a month after the Nakamoto Upgrade is activated. So at some point in Q4. And I think what makes SBTC unique is that it's actually, from what I've seen, I think is the most permissionless way to access Bitcoin on a Bitcoin L2. So, we've seen a lot of other attempts of doing so, but for a lot of these other, I would call them synthetic Bitcoin that exist on additional Bitcoin layers, They're highly centralized, and you have to rely on basically a team that are running a multi-sig, and you have to trust that they're not just going to run away with your Bitcoin, or that maybe the multi-sig will be compromised, and then all those assets are drained from the multi-sig or from the bridge. So what SBTC is going to do is have an open permissionless system of signers, which are essentially validators. And there are interesting kind of tokenomics at play as well to ensure that, those risks are minimized.
Absolutely. And it seems like a lot of exciting things are coming to the ecosystem. And for all my builders out there, they're always wondering, hey, what's something you think needs to be built today in Web3? Like, if you couldn't work on StackingDAO and you had a magic wand, what's something you feel like could either be built in the Stacks ecosystem? Like, what do you think is a good project?
Yeah, I'm very bullish on Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. We still haven't seen too many attempts at those. Right now, we obviously see a lot of growth among USDC and Tether, and those are obviously centralized companies that are, where you deposit dollars and they issue a stable coin that's backed by those dollars, but they can unilaterally block transactions or, kind of prevent certain people from using those assets. I'm still bullish on the idea of more of a decentralized stablecoin, perhaps backed by Bitcoin. We've obviously seen a lot of attempts to make this work, like Terra Luna and others that have collapsed. But I still think we need some of these new experiments to try to find a way that is actually sustainable and is more decentralized. Because I think we all know that we can't be relying on these centralized companies to issue stable coins or other types of assets. I think the future is decentralized, and I'm just bullish on innovation and experimentation to see what works.
All right, guys. Well, get to building that Bitcoin stablecoin. So talk to us a little bit about where people can learn more about you personally, StackingDAO, Stacks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm definitely quite vocal on Twitter. So you can follow me on my Twitter account, which is just at Leeor Shimron, which is my full name. And you can also follow the StackingDAO Twitter account as well, or come to StackingDAO.com if, let's say, you're bullish on Stacks, maybe you already own Stacks and you want to earn those sweet consensus rewards. Again, that's a 9% APY, which you can earn today. Just go to StackingDAO.com and you can easily, within a few clicks, start minting STSTX and start earning those rewards. And then if you want to take it a step further, as we already discussed earlier in this episode, you can start deploying your STSTX across the various DeFi applications that exist right now, whether it's lending it on Zest protocol, maybe borrowing against it on Zest protocol, and then levering up on your position, which is definitely a strategy a lot of degens use. Maybe you want to, earn some LP rewards by depositing it into a DEX AMM like Bitflow. A lot of those opportunities exist, and we actually outline many of those different yield opportunities on our website at StackingDAO.com.
Amazing. Well, everyone, go check out the website. Go get your Liquid Staking tokens. And thank you so much for coming on the Building Web3 podcast. Let's continue building the future here.